Welcome to the Sabbath Life podcast. Here is a space where we share stories about the Abbey of the Heights, the Christian contemplative tradition, and rhythms of life that make us more human and friends with time. I'm Peter White, and I'm one of the hosts of the Abbey of the Heights, a Christian retreat space here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And today I am joined by my friend Min Soo Choi. Min, do you want to share a little bit about who you are and the work that you do?
Well, first of all, it's so good to be with you, Father Peter. I have been looking forward to this. A little bit about me. My name is Min Soo Choi. I live with my family, my wife, and my 3 kids in Newberg, Oregon. We attend a small Anglican church here in Newberg. Maybe 2 things about me. I love storytelling and filmmaking. And so I do a little bit of filmmaking as a creative expression of who I am. And I also am getting ordained in July 2026 into holy orders as a deacon within our Anglican context. And so I'm excited for what that means. Yes. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, I am excited for you too. That is fantastic. That is really great news. Well, Min, I wanted to invite you on the podcast because you produced a short mini documentary for the Sabbath Life a couple of years ago, and wanted you to be able to hear what that process was like for you and your experience in doing that. And for anybody that's had the opportunity to see that documentary, to hear kind of the behind the scenes thinking that went on behind all that. So do you want to maybe start with, like, how did the Sabbath Life first get on your radar screen? How did you learn about it?
Well, I don't exactly remember how this idea came up, Peter, but I remember talking with you, and I think like maybe the first couple things that I learned about you is that we shared maybe a love for stories and film. I know you're a little bit of a film buff as well. And I remember just us just connecting on why stories matter, and not just other people's stories, but our stories. And why not consider storytelling as a practice that somehow connects to what you were sharing with me about what your hope is for the Sabbath life and the community that you are growing in Tulsa. And so I felt like because of all those connections, I remember somehow just being like, hey, what if we actually did a film together, and what you're doing in your neighborhood, what you're trying to build and create is actually really important. And I think it does deserve a little bit of like just space wherever in the digital world that we live in to share that story, but share that story not necessarily in like a marketing way. I had no desire to make a commercial for you or anything like that for the Sabbath Life, but an authentic story, a story of the people who connect there, who are there, the story of you and your inspiration, and some of the things that you are hoping to do, your calling as a minister. All those things were really intriguing to me. And so I think that's how we started the conversation. And then I think you, to your credit, took a great leap of faith and said, yes, Min, how about we work together, and I'll open up myself to what you're thinking. And then we just started collaborating. And I'll speak for myself. I had a wonderful time doing that.
I did too. It was a wonderful time. So what did you hope that you wanted to communicate about the Abbey of the Heights, maybe even before you arrived and got to see it in person?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things that struck me as we were in pre-production. One was just your heart and your care for those who go to to the Sabbath life, to this contemplative community. I think some of the things that we were talking about were, why in this world would someone ever want to or need to be in a place like this? What does that mean? What kind of things would they find there? And I think we shared stories of healing, stories of almost like responding to maybe painful experiences or experiences that felt contrary to the faith that we hold so dear, that we live in a world that's so majors on busyness and achievement and things that we agreed like distort and sort of derail our humanity. Like these things were really intriguing to me that here was someone who not only cared about people, but understood how the world actually pressures us into these ways of dehumanization and exhaustion and almost like being discouraged and disenchanted in our understanding of who God is. And so I think that was one of the draws of like
Mm,
learning what it really means and maybe even lifting the veil off of any like preconceived notions of what a contemplative community does or looks like. But yeah, like I wanted to make sure we talked about this a lot of like the film that we were going to do together was actually built on trust, on honesty, on that creative collaboration, on actually showing a true slice of the life that's lived there. And so I think that was the other thing too. Like I think you invited me to hold each other accountable to these things of like we're not trying to manipulate, we're not trying to sort of pre put together a tightly knit idealized picture of this community, but to just show up on a random weekend almost and just show a little bit of the ordinary life that it persists and exists there. And so I think we captured that, and that was the other goal, really, of just to do it to tell a story in a way that doesn't consume or take advantage of anyone who's there, including yourself, but to just genuinely be a presence and be a witness to the beautiful things that are happening there. That's what I remember. What do you
yeah.
think? Yeah. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Well, and I'm thinking too, like, to be clear to the audience, like for anybody that has ever tried to create anything like this before, like you didn't just show up at the Abbey with your camera and
No.
wander around. We spent several months. I can't remember, 3 or 4 months doing weekly Zoom calls.
That's
And
right.
like, do you remember what you were looking for in those conversations that we were having leading up to it? And at that time, you had never been here.
Yeah.
You live in Oregon.
Yeah.
And we were just having conversations about what was happening here at the Abbey.
Yeah. I think part of what we were talking about was a little bit of like the ethics of storytelling and filmmaking. And we were talking a little bit about like maybe even the cultural moment that we live in of how social media and creating digital footprints and producing content can be both a very consumeristic sort of distorting thing, or it can be a redemptive practice that actually leads to life and leads to health and leads to a goodness. And so a lot of what we were like trying to navigate through is like, how do we want to do this? And what sort of things that we want to talk about? And how do we do it in a way that's not so much prescriptive, that's almost like we have a script and we're going to perform, but to actually do like a documentary. So that's a genre of film that we tried to produce, which was a documentary. And to me, doc work is about honoring what is actual and what is real and what's not manufactured, what's not performed, but is just a showcase of what there is. And I felt like we had a lot of like just like theological conversations around this, a lot of social conversations around this. And ultimately it was so actually informative and insightful for me as just learning, I'm a sort of a novice filmmaker to learn like, how do we think about that? Or how do we actually make sure that this has integrity or this has authenticity to it? Yeah. So I remember us having like lots of really invigorating conversations about that. I'm wondering what your take was as I was bombarding you with questions and ideas. And it felt like very experimental in a lot of ways.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I absolutely love those conversations. Those are conversations I feel like I've had for years and years, is just talking about kind of our faith and art and telling stories and how that gets expressed in all these creative ways. And so yeah, you're a fantastic dialogue partner in that. And then being able to translate that and pivot then to, okay, well, now we're doing this about this particular place and this work that I've invested myself in for a number of years at this point. So I'm curious then, like, when, after having those conversations for a number of months, then you showed up on the doorstep after I picked you up from the airport. And so how did them meet, or what were your expectations that you were bringing with you? And then what did you find when you showed up?
Well, one of the things I didn't realize that I was sort of like going to experience was I got to be just a temporary resident of, the place.
Yeah,
And
you
so
got to stay here a couple nights.
yes, that's right. And you were gracious enough to host me in the actual house. And, my first impressions of the house was like, oh, this is actually, there's something about this house that's both beautiful. There's history around that house you were telling me. And then we just took a small tour of just like all the different places. And as much as I was filming there, we didn't necessarily film every moment that I was there. I got to just experience rest and sort of was able to just like be present as a resident almost. And I felt like I got a sense of what it really means to abide there. I think each room, each part of the house has a story to tell. And so for me, it was as a trained semiotician, like my doctoral work was just trying to figure out like what are the messages underneath the symbols and signs when you describe it, or when you were talking about different rooms or the history of the house. I was trying to picture like, oh, there is there's something going on here that's extraordinarily special, and it's something that resonates with my longings as a modern individual living in this world that we live in. I felt so refreshed just being there, as much as doing the work and doing that film work with you. So I remember those were my first impressions, that this felt like a gift to me, not just like a place where I'm going to do work and invade the space. I got to be a part of it. Yeah.
Hmm. You used a phrase earlier that I think I want to come back to and maybe explore right now. And that's, you used the word practice related to
Mhm.
storytelling. So could you say some more about like storytelling as a spiritual practice?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Let me give you some context first. I mean, when I went to seminary in Chicago, I felt like that's when Facebook, Instagram became huge. And I remember having to navigate both my theological education in a time period where everyone just started integrating social media practices. I remember distinctly those times, and how incredibly powerful it was, how incredibly novel it was. And it's sort of weird how in the short, 15, 16 years that has become just like universal, like worldwide, like how used to it we are. I feel like it's still in its infancy. But I think one of the questions that was raised during that time was like, what is this? Is this a tool for our self-destruction? Is it a tool for idolization and distracting and I don't know, like dehumanizing us? Or is there actually something here that at least is a observation about our desires as human beings to tell stories and be connected? And so that's where storytelling became an idea of like, well, what does storytelling as a practice actually look like in the church? And so a lot of what I was exploring was things like testimony and how that
Hmm.
actually is a practice of the church. How the stories of faithfulness, whether it's missionaries or church planners or just serving the community, serving the poor, serving orphans and widows, how it's important for us to encounter the work of God in these ways, how that actually affected my faith and the community and our vision, our collective vision and imagination for who God is and what God is doing in this world and what we're called to do. And I realized like actually storytelling is not just like this like passive thing, but it's something that we're called to do, just like showing up to worship on a Sunday, or figure out how our vocation and our imagination and our calling actually is an active thing. And then I realized, like, in fact, storytelling is actually a healing process. It's a redemptive act that if you've experienced hard things in your life, or you've experienced trauma in your life, or you've experienced difficulty in your life, the power of storytelling, especially telling your own story, allows you to engage with God and speak to God through elements of this practice of storytelling. And this is how it became sort of like a core idea in sort of my a vision for ministry in a church setting, in a faith community setting, and really just in like just our culture as well, of like why it matters so much. And so that's kind of like the seed for what has become like a real like desire for talking about storytelling as a practice, especially as a contemplative practice, because I think that's what
Mm.
it truly
Hmm.
is. The
Hmm.
ordering of our stories, looking back, sort of understanding what's happening in the present, even looking forward. And
Yeah.
that's why I like the word practice. It's we all have stories.
Yeah.
We do. But it's not until we actually practice storytelling that we it manifests itself in beautiful and good ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I can remember as, in your youth group, um, I was raised in a church that valued testimony and
Mm,
telling your testimony and hearing other people's testimony.
yeah.
And even remembering that our church had this story that it had been slowly declining and was on the verge of dying. And then
Mm,
they hosted something that was called a lay witness mission. So this was in the United Methodist tradition. And it was like in the 70s and 80s, this thing of inviting people from another city, just
mm,
regular, ordinary people. So not clergy or pastors, but to come and tell their story of how God changed them. And that was something that revitalized the congregation and set the church on a new trajectory. And so like that's one way that like stories hit me as spiritual practice as you're talking about that. But then I'm also thinking about like our own, some of the ways we do that in our Anglican settings too, using the calendar to
yeah.
talk about that Easter and Christmas aren't just these things on the calendar, but it's the story of Jesus. And we're ordering our lives around this story of
Yeah.
Jesus.
Oh, that's right. Not to nerd out too much, but like
We can do
um
that.
I mean, stories have like sort of elements in them. There's structure in stories, and if you learn about storytelling just as a practice and as an art, I think it's fascinating how much there is like ordering and structuring and techniques to storytelling. That's actually both like interesting and in some ways, as you learn them, they allow you to be as creative. Like often people think like a three acts. Like people think like if you make rules in stories, it actually restricts storytelling.
Uh-huh.
But what actually I found it to be the opposite of like there's actually ideas and insights about storytelling like that we find in movies or TV shows or the structures of narrative books and things like that that are helpful. They're sort of universal in some
Mhm.
ways. Um, and so that has also been something that has been really, really interesting, which is I don't think everyone knows the technical aspects of storytelling, but I feel like everyone has a good idea of when a story makes sense, when it
Mhm.
feels good, when it's resonating with you. And what I've discovered is that there are like universal elements that actually allow us to move towards good storytelling,
Mm.
compelling storytelling. And I think in some ways, stories are as essential as our humanness. And that is an interesting observation about how God has created us. That
Yeah.
we are actually story bearers. We are storytellers. We have a story and we're also imprinted with God's story. And
Mhm.
so I find it to be really, really interesting to talk to people, not just of their story, but like helping them order their story in a way that makes sense to them, as well as something that like really connects with me and the audience.
Yeah. So you mentioned storytelling is contemplative practice, not just spiritual practice. So
Oh yeah.
tell me what you're thinking about that as a contemplative practice?
I mean, I can speak on it from a personal level of like, whenever I've been invited into some deep contemplative practice, it always involves me reflecting on God's faithfulness in my life from an early age, like my life story a little bit. And as I've gotten older, like the way that I would tell my story, my childhood story in my 20s, is not necessarily the same way that I would tell it today in my 40s. And what I've sort of observed about that is that the language and the words that we actually use and how we choose to tell our story is also part of our growth, of our healing, especially if we have trauma or pain in our life. That it is actually essential to go back and see how God has been faithful in our lives. And so I like, to me, when we're even preparing to share a story of faith, like our own testimony of God's grace and mercy in our life, that actually is a process in itself of us acknowledging and worshiping God. And in that sense, I've come to see it as a true spiritual practice. It is a prayer in itself. It is psalmic. It is proverbial in how we tell our stories. And in that sense, it is deeply contemplative. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about contemplative practices, I'm thinking about things that help me pay attention to my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the more I've learned contemplative practices, the more I learned how bad I am at just being reflective. I just want to go on to the next thing. What's next? When taking the time to pause and remember and reflect is so key to like holding on to what was good about what happened. And the way that I think about telling a story as a way of paying attention to what happened, I think is can be really key in the way that we make meaning and find purpose with the world.
Yeah. And maybe I'd add a little footnote here of, I don't think the goal of a contemplative practice or contemplative life is to, at the end of it, come with a propositional truth
Right.
or a statement of certainty or a math equation or a treatise or a specific set of rules, although those can all be a part of it. But what I've realized, that I think for me, contemplation, there is a tacitness to it.
Hmm.
There's emotion. There is deep connecting with our physiology as well as our imagination, with all of our being. And so there's also this like mystery dynamic to it. And so I think stories, off some of the best stories that I've ever heard, maybe even some of the pieces of art or movies that I've seen that do this so well, are able like express different dimensions of our humanness. Stories that are able to invoke emotion and really share why a character does something so core, or angry at this, or feeling pain or suffering or trauma in these ways, and able to just reflect on what that means and how that moves the character through the story and through the world. I think contemplation allows us to be imaginative about the life that we have experienced and live in a way that goes beyond words, that goes beyond propositions, and more so connects to us on a deeper level. And that's why
Yeah.
I love the practice of it.
So coming back then to your experience of the Abbey, you were here
Mhm.
for like a day and a half,
Yeah.
a little bit more than that. And so at the end of that, what story were you hoping to tell about this place, having then been here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the starting point was telling a little bit of your story, right?
Mm,
And how that story is deeply connected to the place and the people there. And if you watch the film, I think one of the things that felt like it was like a gravitational pull was healing. I think when I think about uh, the Abbey, when I think about your life, when I think about what you care about and what you hope to communicate and give to others is that there's a hope of healing and the hope of renewal as we inevitably become wounded or experience pain or experience loss or experience suffering in this life. And so for me, that's the story that became really compelling because what is offered there is rare and unique. Because because I think the world will say, well, you find like time heals wounds, right?
Hmm.
That's the saying. Or you just have to achieve that next thing or achieve a certain lifestyle or marry the right person or there's so many different ways that people think healing will happen. But what I think the message that I received so strongly at the Abbey was that for you to simply know that you are loved, for you to just simply be here and just rest and abide is actually a and have faith, like place your hope in that you don't have to do something, that it's not on you to heal yourself, but that you can actually experience true redemptive renewal and healing by abiding here in this place, just to be here and just and rest here. I thought that was the story that we were telling. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Me too. That's such a good story. Because
Mhm.
it just sounds like the grace of God. So there's for creative types, there's this phrase of kill your darlings about, anytime you're making something, you got to make it better by cutting some stuff out. And sometimes you got to cut out stuff you really love. Was
Yeah.
there anything in the process that you really loved and wanted to be a part of the story? And yet, as you got through the process, you were realizing, no, that's gotta come out to make this what it needs to be.
I
Do you
mean,
remember any darlings you had to kill?
oh yeah. I mean, in two ways. Like I remember us talking about, well, should we speed it up? Like the documentary that we created together is intentionally slow, I would say. And I
Yeah.
remember us talking, yeah.
I think I remember us having a conversation where I even gave you some notes about like it feels really slow in this one spot.
Yeah. And I don't think you were wrong. I think what I felt like you were communicating was, do people really want to see this part of it? Or does this move the story along? And it got me to think about like, this is just one of those dynamics in storytelling of like, I think when you think about particular movies, like for entertainment purposes, this is important. You got to keep the pacing up. Like, I just saw Trolls 3 with my kids and Super Mario Galaxy. I want you to know that if you go into that movie thinking that you're going to rest or have a thought of your own, that's not going to happen. These stories are meant to push kids into just like to the next greater thing in the story. That's what it is. It's like moment by moment, just spectacle and pop. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like I chose those movies for my kids. It's fine. Entertainment is great. But I think for this film, I think I was confident enough that I didn't care about being boring. And what I wanted to risk was the same feeling that I felt there, which was, and this is something I struggle with personally. So let me get real with you for a second. Like my past and my current, like sort of like mentality is I get worth from doing. My value is dependent on producing. Okay. And so what I wanted to do, because I'm so sensitive in this area, was I wanted to create a film that felt like you weren't rushed. I was inspired by a documentary called Truffle Hunters. I don't know if we ever talked about this.
Yeah, yeah, we did.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite documentaries because the story in leading up to the filming of the documentary is actually more interesting than the actual documentary itself. And the documentary is quite interesting. But basically, these filmmakers who made this film spent almost the same amount of time or even more building trust with the people that they were filming. And they followed three specific truffle hunters who are passionate about white truffles in northern Italy, and they're very secretive. They're old, and they don't want people to like be in their lives. They just want to kind of do their own thing. And I read an article that the only reason that they were able to make that film was because they showed themselves to be honorable, having integrity, and they built true relationships with these people and cared about them and wanting to. And that was an inspiration for me on multiple levels. But the thing that we're talking about is in that documentary, there's just it's there's just scenes in there that just show the light. It's not moving the narrative. It's not necessarily like trying to get you from point A to point B. The actual purpose of some of those scenes in there is just to bask in that scene. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I felt like there was a lot of scenes in the film that we were making, which was just you going about your day and at the Abbey. And I wanted to capture that. And I think it communicates something on a deeper level, which is it's not about what you're doing. It's about you being present and just being there and nothing's really happening. And it allows, I think it allows us in some way to take in beauty,
Mm,
like really experience it to a different degree in a way that's actually, um, like confirming and affirming and strengthening and fortifying in some ways.
mm,
And if you're able to just I totally I want to take a step back and be like, this is a film that you watch on YouTube. And, we can have all these thoughts about do we need more screen time? Do we need to watch another thing? You don't need more content. But if we're going to create a piece of work or we're going to tell a story, I want to tell it in the same spiritual vein as what we're trying to share. And so that required a slowing down of pace and adding in these little ordinary things that I think are often undervalued. And so I wanted to include those things. So it's our documentary is like the longest one that I've created. And it was specifically purposed that way. Yeah.
mm,
So
Having it now, well, gosh, that was an experience now almost 2 years ago. Would you want to add another chapter to it? We don't have to commit to a sequel, but like if you were to imagine this is something that got left out, I wish we could tell this in addition to what we did. Is there anything that comes to mind?
yeah, I think one of my favorite parts and one of the more powerful parts was the gathering that I got to
Yeah.
film. And people got to just share a little bit of how they've been encouraged by being a part of the Sabbath life. And I think a sequel would be compelling to talk to more individuals and have them actually share more, just as a almost like an ACAM, sort of they're just part of it's I think you drove the story and we were able to capture scenes. And I would almost want to do that and go further and have other people as part of the main narrative. They're just some of the main characters. And I think that's natural because as the Sabbath Life continues to build history and more people are involved, I think more stories of how the ministry there um, has offered these good things can be told, and that's what I would encourage you of in the same way, with the same respect and the same integrity, invite others to share their testimony through the podcast or through your own film. Because I think, there's nothing really secret about it. You just need a camera, Peter, and you can do it
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah.
Just point the camera and yeah, stuff happens, right?
Yeah. That's what I would say, which is what's so powerful. First of all, people need to be reminded
Mhm.
their story is worthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not something to just sell or exploit, but when people hear it,
Yeah.
they will be blessed
Yeah.
if you tell it with honesty and with authenticity. I think it's so important that it's a courageous act. It is
Mm.
testimonial in that sense.
Mhm.
It is witnessing to something
Mhm.
that's really beautiful. Yeah, the camera is really the least important factor. It's really the act and the practice, the reinforcing of this idea of your story matters. And
Yeah.
when it goes into the world, whether it's being filmed or not, that's actually a miracle.
Well, this has been so awesome. There's so many things that I feel like we just barely scratched the surface of. Maybe we'll have to come back and
Truly,
have more conversations about this stuff because this has been really rich and really good.
truly.
I've got a handful of questions here that I like asking all of our guests. So this is
Yeah,
just like a lightning round, top of mind. Don't think too hard about this question. Just go with the first
yeah,
thing that comes to you. Are you game for it?
totally. Let's do it.
All right, man. So what's the last book that you read?
Leslie Newbegin's Open Secret,
Mm,
Theology of Mission, and it's fantastic. My gosh, I've been reflecting on it, but it's an older book, but
yeah,
I
that's
love
good
that book.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. If your job was something different than it is right now, what would you want it to be?
I mean, this is an easy answer. So I currently work in marketing. I've been doing that the last 3.5 years, but I am progressively moving towards vocational ministry at a local church. And so that is my hope, is to serve a church without having to divide my attention. So that's my hope.
Nice.
Yeah. Mhm.
Awesome. If you could travel to a place that you've never been before, where do you want to go?
Like so many places. Like I would just say not the United States. Like anywhere else. I have a fondness for particular cultures where storytelling still is actually really crucial. I think about like places in West Africa where there are like true vocations of almost like historians and story keepers, and it's just
Mm,
part of their culture. I think about a place that's so fascinating to me, which is like anywhere in Southeast Asia, but specifically like places like Tokyo and Seoul. I would love to go back there. And then perhaps, I mean, anywhere in India would be also another amazing place to just visit and learn. So,
do you have a comfort food movie that you could just watch 100 times that never gets old?
yes. Oh, we should talk about movies. That should have been the whole podcast. I have a couple that actually I have on rewatch a lot. One is The Lord of the Rings. I'll just play the extended editions all the way through just in the
Yeah.
background a lot of the times. But a probably one of my favorite, I could watch it over and over and over again, is the movie Gattaca, which is
Mm,
an Ethan Hawke, Uma Thurman movie with Jude Law. It is one of the first core movies that I've come to appreciate and love so much. And let me add one more there. Like, so that's a great movie to watch on the idea of grace. Okay. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to spoil anything. If you've not seen Gattaca, it is totally worth watching. One more fun one, Fifth Element. It's my favorite Bruce Willis movie. It is one of the best sci-fi movies I've ever seen. I would rate it anywhere within the pantheon of sci-fi. Chris Tucker's performance is all-time great in that. It's such a silly, fun. It's like everything you would want in a sci-fi flick like that. So
yeah.
those are three movies I
Yeah.
have on repeat. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. What's your favorite place to eat a meal?
That's it. I mean, like outside of my home, like I have 3 kids now and we eat at home most of the time. But you know what's truly been a gift? So Chipotle is our number one go-to place.
Uh-huh.
And so they have a cool family deal that just like really fulfills um a weekday night for us. But I will say this, people are going to judge this. I actually really love McDonald's.
Yeah.
I grew up on McDonald's. When we were poor growing up in Columbus, Ohio, the treat for me was a Happy Meal once a week and my mother taking there. And that's something that I do with my kids every Friday after the end of the school week is just get some McDonald's drive through, get some Happy Meals, go home and just hang out. So McDonald's is up there for me.
There's something really nostalgic about 80s McDonald's, isn't there?
I, there's been a lot of hate of McDonald's that it's unhealthy, all this stuff. I go the other way. I think it's been a marker of grace and fun, especially in my life and in our family's life. Yeah,
If we were going to karaoke, what would be your song?
that's a great question. Probably an Elton John song
Mm,
because I just love how his lyrics are like these random stories. The stories don't make any sense, but I love like your song, Leave On, Rocket Man. Any of those would be I would love to, and I feel like I could do it. Like I think I can do like, especially now, Elton John. Now I can do that lower register karaoke. So yeah, Elton
awesome.
John.
Awesome. What would you say makes you laugh the hardest?
Oh, I mean, I'm a huge fan of stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
I would say like Nate Bargatze, Mike Birbiglia, Pete Holmes. These are relatively cleaner comics, but I love comedy of all kinds. But yeah, like those three are awesome, and sketch comedy as well. So like SNL's really big. So I enjoy a good joke. I enjoy a good bit for sure. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Min, you hinted at that you've made some other documentaries in addition
Yeah.
to the Sabbath Life one. So if someone wanted to see those and see what other work you've done, what would be the best place to track those down?
Yeah. All of my movies are on YouTube at Story Ministry is the handle. So you can find them there. And I love actually collaborating on storytelling. So if you have a story that you want to tell, but are just looking for ways to tell that story, would love to connect with you. Yeah.
Awesome. And so what would be the best way for somebody to do that?
You can email me at min@c4.
All right. Awesome. And we'll drop all this in the show notes so people can find those pretty easy. Well, man, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today and be with us. And listeners, thank you too for joining us. You can learn more about the ministry of the Sabbath Life on our website, thesabbathlife.com. You can find information there about booking a personal retreat here or for a group at the Abbey of the Heights. If you'd like to make a financial gift to support the ministry of the Sabbath Life, you can also do that on the website at thesabbathlife.com/give. We exist because of the generosity of people just like you. And then last thing, be sure that you're subscribing to the podcast so that you're able to catch the next stories that we share. If you like what you're hearing, please also give us a review so that others can more easily discover us. You can help spread the word about the Abbey of the Heights and a life of rest. So until next time, may you know in the deepest parts of your soul that you are God's beloved.